we're told in the Gospels that Jesus was a carpenter by trade. That is, he worked with wood, cutting, hammering, making things. And undoubtedly, he learned how to become a carpenter because his dad was a carpenter. And so I imagine that when Jesus was young, he spent a lot of time in his father's workshop watching him work and handle wood. And I also imagine that Jesus learned some lessons about wood and how to use it and handle it. Well, for anybody who's ever worked in a wood shop, cutting wood knows that it can create a lot of sawdust. And sawdust, it can go everywhere, including all over yourself. And maybe that's what Jesus had in mind when he began to teach about judging others. In Matthew's Gospel, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus recognized that there is a tendency in us as individuals to look at another person, judge their lives, whether they're good or bad, and come to a conclusion about them. Jesus also realized that sometimes we can begin pointing out other people's faults, their own problems, their own sins, and judging them based on what we observe and see. And so Jesus shared about wood and sawdust to help us understand what judging looks like and how it can become detrimental in the life of a person. In Matthew's Gospel in the 7th chapter, we hear these words from Jesus. "Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, 'Let me take that speck out of your eye,' when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite! First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye." You see, we spend a lot of time and energy, I think, in our lives pointing out the speck in other people's eyes. Those things that we think are wrong. Those decisions they made that are bad. The way they are living that is not good. And we judge them and come to a conclusion about them. And we spend our time trying to clear out that speck in their eye. And so Jesus says, why do you worry about the speck in your brother's eye when you've got a plank of wood sticking out of your own? You see, it's so easy to judge others and point fingers at others and then not think about our own shortcomings, our own sins, our own faults. It's easy to come to a conclusion that a person is this or that and then size them up and label them and categorize them without ever taking a look at ourselves. And so Jesus finally just comes up and says, do not judge. Do not judge, because the way that you judge others is the way that you will be judged. We each have our own faults. We have our own problems. We have our own personal struggles. And we have our own sinfulness. And so the call in our lives as individuals is to invest the time that we have seeking to make our lives better, looking at the planks in our own eye rather than spending time consumed about the sawdust in someone else's eyes. You see, God's ultimately the final judge, and God will ultimately have the final say about all of us. And we can trust God's judgment. So the next time we're tempted to come to a judgment about someone because of something in their eye, the way they live, or the way they talk, or the way they act, or any other part about who they are. Let's always stop and remember what Jesus said. Don't worry so much about the sawdust in someone else's eye. Worry more about the plank in our own. That's something to think about. And even more so, it's a way to live in the world and to live a life that ultimately is pleasing to God, who in the end will judge everything and figure it all out for us. God bless.